Hello and welcome back to Fat Man Little Trail, the podcast for all you outdoor lovers out there, where everyone is included, just like the outdoors should be. I have a really good show to. Well, I take that back. I had a really good show planned for you. I'm hoping that the show is going to be just as good as what I had planned. But I had a guest come that was supposed to come on, who was going to talk about some great stuff to help you on your journeys into the outdoors, and they had to cancel at the last minute. Which is unfortunate. But it got me thinking about how when you are going to an outdoor adventure of any sort, there's thorough planning that has to go into it to make it successful and to make it fun. I know, a little walk in the park you might not have to do as much, but if you're going to do something, you have to have it planned, but you also have to be willing at any moment to turn around and change those plans or to adjust those plans on the fly. And that's kind of what I have to do this week on the podcast, which hopefully will be successful because I have some experience with having to change my hiking plans and my outdoor plans on a fly. The preparation is important. The preparation to get everything prepared. You need to make sure that you have maps set up. People who go out and hike without maps, these people drive me crazy when they go out on a hike and they're like, "Oh, do you know how far it is? Or do you know, like, when does this loop back around?" And like, "You're on the Colorado Trail. This goes for 400 miles, Or you see them with just like a single 8-ounce little bottle of bottled water. They're not prepared for what they're out doing. So when I go on a hike, I try to be as prepared as I can. I get the weather forecast from the night before. I get the trail maps from the apps that I like to use. I make sure that I have plenty of water, I have food, I have extra gear if I'm going to need that. But I don't plan for every contingency, but I plan for some of the contingencies. And I'm not a crazy overpacker. I used to be a crazy overpacker. When I started this hiking journey a year and a half ago or so, I brought everything. I'm like, "Oh, do I need to bring a canoe? Sure, put that in your backpack. Do you need to bring a tent? Sure, put that in your backpack." But it's a 1 mile hike. Well, I wanted to make sure that I was prepared. And I think as you get more experienced in hiking and going outdoors, you have a easier time of backing off what you need to bring or just having a better idea of what you'll actually need on a hike. So I make sure that I'm prepared and I make sure that I'm good in case I go too far. If I go, a 5 mile hike becomes a 10 mile hike, I'm still prepared for that. If a 5 mile hike becomes a 50 mile hike, I might be in a little bit of trouble. But preparing is really important. And the one thing that I always do is I make sure that I have maps. Out in Colorado, where I do a lot of my hiking, and even when I was in Utah and to a certain extent in Arizona when I was hiking there, you need to make sure that you have a map because you can't really rely on a cell phone signal to make sure that you're going to be able to call up maps on your cell phone and things like that. So it was really important to me to have that. Or it is important to me to have that for each hike. But it's getting harder and harder. And I talked at the beginning about being able to adapt. Well, the other day I went out to one of my favorite hikes, which is a state park near me called Staunton State Park. And I've been there probably 30 times. And I talk about it on my website all the time and have reviews on my website all the time. And I've never had a problem getting into Staunton. And this was a Saturday morning at like 8 a.m. And I pulled in and I could not find a parking spot in Staunton. And all of a sudden I have to adjust where I'm going for the day because I've already planned on spending half the day out hiking, and I need to make sure that I'm going to do something outside. So I start driving around until I just find another trail, and it was a fun experience, but it was one that I wasn't as comfortable with because I wasn't as prepared. And I've seen that a lot more. I think we have these ticketing systems now for some of the bigger parks, but what that's doing is drawing people out to some of the smaller parks that aren't as they don't have the parking, they don't have the facilities to handle the more people that are coming out to those. So I think that it's important to always have kind of a plan A, plan B if you're going to go out on a weekend, or if you're going to go out on a day and you want to make sure that you're going to hike no matter what, just to make sure that you have those plans and those maps and everything that you need for that. So where, if you go to a plan B hike, where you're going to end up and you have some idea of what the hike you were doing is. The trail that I ended up on, I had no idea what I was doing, and it was not the best hike that I've ever done. It was one of those where I just kind of found a spot and decided to go, and it was a lot rockier than I was hoping for, and it wasn't everything that I was hoping for out of the hike. But I ended up safe, and I ended up back, with a couple hours outdoors in nature. So that adaptation was good. But with the amount of people that are going to these places, I'm seeing more and more of it where I've had to I I'm going to plan on going here, but I'm going to end up somewhere else. So now what I've done is now I start to, especially on weekend hikes and holiday hikes, is I always have a plan B and I have maps downloaded for both places where I go, which is important. The other thing that can be really important, and I talked about this with my guest a couple weeks ago, is weather related changes. And I talked to meteorologist Matt Makins about some of the things that you can do to make sure that you're as prepared as you can be for the weather. Knowing when it's going to come in and what to do when it does come in, and recognizing when it's time to say, that's it, I can't do this hike anymore, and changing your plans right then and there, and going from finishing the hike to making sure you're safe. And there's like a click over at any point that you need to be ready to accept that your hike isn't going to be the same hike that you want, but it might be more important to get down off a mountain or into a structure, or depending on hail or lightning and things like that. And then there's the other ones where you just can't finish. And I think that we get into this mindset of, I'm going to go do a hike and I'm going to finish the hike. And I think it happens a lot out here in Colorado where people are like, I want to finish a 14er, I want to finish a 13er. Or they get a very specific hike or climb in their mind that they're going to finish. And they don't always make the best decisions, and people don't always make the best decisions because we're ingrained in this like failure is not an option mentality. And for me, being relatively new to the hiking scene, I mean, year and a half and 200 hikes in now, I don't think I'm really that new anymore. But I'm not in the best shape in the world, hence the name Fat Man Little Trail. I'm more of on the hefty hiker side, and I think that I'm probably quicker to decide, okay, this isn't safe, I'm not going to do this, and I'm going to try it another day, or I'm just not feeling it today, or my ankle hurts, or I'm sunburnt, or I don't have enough food to finish this, or I don't have enough water to finish this. I think that's something that we can all look at and think to ourselves, because I've seen people that were in really bad sorts, especially people that come out to visit Colorado and decide, I'm going to fly out to Colorado and I'm going to do a 14er, or I'm going to do a 13er, or I'm going to do anything at high altitude. And I've seen people in a world of hurt kind of stumbling their way back down the mountain because they've gone too far. And I think people always think that there's something bad in failure. And I think that there's obviously failure is not accomplishing your goal, but when you think about what you did accomplish while you did the first half of a hike, or the first 3/4 of it, or even if you made it to the trailhead and said, nope, I'm done, each one of those is a lesson that's been learned, and something that you can take forward to your next hike. All the hikes except for one. There's one hike that I failed that I have not gone back and finished yet, and it's a goal of mine to go back and finish that this year. Although they're under a ticket system now, so it's a little bit trickier. But all the other ones, I made it halfway and I said, okay, this just isn't the day for this. And I turned around and I just didn't finish it. And I got to go back and take that knowledge with me and do a safer version of that hike the next time that I tried it, and a more prepared version of that hike. A lot of these trails, you'll see somebody be like, oh, it was easy. And then the next review of the trail says, that was hard, and you don't really know exactly what to expect. So going there and doing half of it and realizing like this just isn't the day for me is there. It's noble. You can get away with that. And I think people are ashamed of that mentality. And sometimes people are like, well, this is my only chance to do it. The mountain's not going to go anywhere. So if it takes you another year to get it done, you can try it that way. I did write something, a blog that I wrote that kind of summed this up. And I wanted to kind of go over it with you here today. The blog was called I Tried and I Lost. And this is how it goes towards, changing your plans. I really wish my mantra was too big to fail, That has always worked when trying to summit a buffet or extra large pizza, but today it didn't work while I tried to climb Mount Snitkow. Mount Snitkow, which I pronounce differently every time, was supposed to be my first 13er, and after several attempts thwarted by weather, I had my chance. First, I am an idiot, and I went on the wrong trail and finished another nice little hill, but then I tried Snitkow. After that, it did not go well. The hike is pretty vertical, and about a half mile up, the wind decided to make an appearance. The wind was pushing my 230-pound body around like I was a teddy bear on a swing. This doesn't usually happen, as the anchor of a backside that I possess usually keeps me relatively grounded. I felt like Sisyphus from Greek mythology, but instead of pushing a boulder, I was pushing my belly up a hill. The wind also made it harder to breathe. I say harder because the 30% grade over the 12,000 feet of elevation already made it hard enough. My mantra has been, screw it, I'm trying. It has served me well so far, and I continue to use it when I struggle or when I don't think I can finish a hike. Today it was replaced with screw this, I tried. And that's okay. If it was easy, I'm sure everyone would do this, and it is important to know your limits. My limits are apparently 50-mile-an-hour winds, 2 pizzas, and 41 strips of bacon at the hotel breakfast service. Limits are limits for a reason, and other than 12 items or less at the grocery store, they shouldn't be ignored. It's good to push the limit. It's good to test the limits. It is good to know the limits. The screw it I'm trying mantra is about acknowledging I haven't gotten to the limit yet. It is about knowing the benefit of the trail to the couch and also when the couch is the best choice. I failed. It happens. It's not going to stop me. I'm not going to try Snitkow again soon, and I am going to try Snitkow again soon, and I'm going to beat it. Maybe not the next time or the time after that, but I will summit sooner or later. Like Sisyphus boulder, my belly will roll back down the hill, and I will try to push it back up again and again, because even though I tried and failed once, screw it. I'm trying again. And I am proud to say that about a month after I tried and failed, that was like my 3rd attempt that I failed, that I wrote that blog. And about a month later, I did it. I made it to the top, and it felt good. It felt really good to get up there. It's not really that hard of a hike. It's just steep, and it was one of those that just had my number. Every time I went out there, I just wasn't feeling it, and I couldn't get to the top. And then I did, I made the adjustments, and I think that if I would have gone out there and tried really hard to finish it those times that I didn't, I would have hurt myself, or I would have turned myself off from hiking in general. But I had to make that adjustment to those plans. I had everything planned. It didn't work out the way I had it planned, and I made those adjustments, and I decided to come back with a new plan and try again. And there's no shame in that. So if you think that you're not going to be able to finish a hike, or you think that you're, getting yourself in a bad position, don't be afraid to just say, that's it, I'm turning around. That is my advice. That's the advice from the Fat Man today. And like I said, I finished the hike. I went back and I did it. So mountains don't move. They're not going to run away from you. So if you try it once and it didn't work, feel free to try it again the next weekend, or the weekend after that, or a year from now. Especially if you were like me, or you're just starting a journey to get in better shape and to get, maybe lose weight, or to hike more, or to do something like that, and you start feeling good about it, and you're like, okay, I can knock that 13er out, I can knock that 14er out, I can do these things now. And then you run into it and it gets a little challenging. Well, don't be afraid to just say, okay, I'll get it next time. So anyway, so that's my little rant about adjusting your plans and changing up everything that you do. When life gives you lemons, they say make lemonade. So when the trail gives you scree, go ahead and hike on the rocks instead, I guess. I do have to talk about this week's hike of the week, the next segment of the show. The hike of the week this week is Herman's Gulch, and I think everybody has a Herman's Gulch in their pocket. Herman's Gulch is a hike that I did about a year ago, and then I just did it again this last week. And it was a hike that a buddy of mine, Scott, told me about and took me up to it on my first attempt. And it was the first time that I had done an alpine hike. And it was the first time that I realized I could do this. And it really opened up my world to be able to do more and more alpine hiking, more and more hiking that was I thought I couldn't do before. And it's not the hardest hike in the world. It's like 7 miles out, and it's about, I don't know, 15 to 1700 feet of elevation gain. But it's really steep at the beginning, and then it kind of flattens out in the middle, and then it gets really, really steep at the end, going to this beautiful lake that's right at the cusp of 12,000 feet. I think there's one spot you can stand on that's like 12,001 feet. So it was my first time that I'd been to an alpine lake, and it was the first time that I'd gotten to this point in the world. Like if you see them, like it's a lake completely surrounded by a bowl of mountains. So like on three sides, it's all completely surrounded by these towering, just cliffs of stone. And then there's this lake sitting there. And when I went last spring, the lake was half frozen, so it was like a completely frozen alpine lake, and it just opened up so much in me that I realized then that I could actually do this, and I could complete these hikes that I wanted to complete. And then I did it again this last week, and I improved my time by 15 seconds a mile. But that wasn't the important part for me. It was I was finishing my second 52 hike challenge. I talked about the 52 hike challenge in an earlier podcast. But I finished it, and I wanted to go back to kind of the spot that I'd hiked so many other places that were kind of lower elevation, and this was the first time I went into the mountains. So I wanted to go back to where that all began, and kind of my mountain hiking was born. So I went back to Herman's Gulch kind of as a symbolic way of finishing this 52 hike challenge. And it was still steep, and it was still steep at the beginning, steep at the end, and still an absolutely beautiful lake. This time there was no snow, there was no ice, the lake wasn't frozen at all, and it was absolutely beautiful. And it just kind of reminded me of my roots. I think everybody has kind of a hike like Herman's Gulch out there with them, in that it's the first thing you did, whether it's, even if you're not a hiker, even if it's, the first, fish that you caught when you went fishing with your grandpa, and and then you became a fisherman, or the first, job that you got, or the first, time you lifted weights, or the first time that you realized that you could bench 100 pounds or 200 pounds, the first time you squat 400 pounds, whatever it is for you and for what your hobbies are. Everyone has that one thing that makes them say, wow, I can really do this. And for me, that was Herman's Gulch, and that was a really important part of my development as a hiker, because up until that point, I was just kind of a guy who walked in on the trails. And after that, I felt like I was a hiker. I was an outdoor, person, and it was important. So if you haven't found your Herman's Gulch yet, look for it. See what it is. See if the first, I don't know, the first time that you rode your bike 25 miles, or the first time you did whatever it is that your hobby is. I would make a yoga reference, but I don't know anything about yoga. So whatever your hobby is, or the thing that you want to accomplish, find your Herman's Gulch. Find that thing that is kind of that transition that says, I can do this now, and you can try, harder and harder things. And it's kind of a wonderful feeling when you get to that point. So that is our hike of the week, Herman's Gulch. It's right by I-70, or right by the Eisenhower Tunnel on I-70, between Denver and like Breckenridge. So if you're out in the Colorado area, check that out. Last, I guess I'm just going to go ahead and thank you guys all again for all the support you've been giving me, and all the people that have been listening to the podcast and checking out the website at fatmanlittletrail.com. The podcast is kind of fun. It's new, and I restarted it, and I really appreciate all the people who have been listening. And if you do enjoy it on all the different platforms, I think I'm on like 10 different podcasting playing platforms right now. So whatever platform you're on, make sure you like and subscribe if you can, and check me out on the social medias as well. And Instagram is probably the one that I spend the most time on. Fat Man Little Trail on Instagram as well. Check all of those out, and we will talk to you on the next time that I'm on the podcast. I do have a couple more interviews set up for the next few, so hopefully those pan out and those play out, and I don't have to just talk to you for 20 minutes just by myself again. So I do hope to see you on the trail soon, and until then, happy hiking.